Do you need to solve a quadratic equation, but you don't know how? Well, here's a crash review of all the ways I cared enough to learn about. For starters, you can factor the expression. So first, with an equation in this form, you need to find two numbers, z and y, that multiply to c and add to b. So in our example, we have 4 and 3, which multiply to 12 and add to 7. Now that we've found those, we have to factor the expression into x plus z and x plus y equals 0. So in our example, we have x plus 4 and x plus 3 equals 0. And lastly, we use the zero product property to find the x's. So in our example, we just use it to find that x equals -4 and x equals -3. Now the problem with factoring is that we can't factor expressions with an a term. We can only use it if factoring is possible, and it can be challenging in general with large coefficients. Now the AC method. Now the first step is generally the same as factoring, except you need to find two numbers that multiply to a times c and add to b. So in our example, we find a times c, which is 18, and then we find that 9 and 2 multiply to 18 and add to 11. Now we break the bx term into cx plus kx. In our steps, we take the expression and split 11x into 9x and 2x, just like 9 and 2. So now we group and factor out the GCF of each term. So we group the first two terms and then the last two terms, and then we factor out the GCF from the first, which is 3x, and then 1 from the second, because there's no greatest common factor except for 1. And lastly, we add them together and use the zero product property to find the x's. So then we can add 3x and 1 because 2x plus 3 is a common factor between both. And then using the zero product property, we can find that x equals -1/3 and x equals -3/2. Now the AC method solves the a problem, but still can be challenging with large coefficients and only works if factoring is possible. So we move on to completing the square. First, we have to move c to the opposite side. So you have to move 5 to the other side, making it -5. Then you have to find b over 2 squared. b is 6, so 6 over 2 squared is 9. Third, you have to add this term to each side. So here we added 9 to each side. And then lastly, we have to factor the last side and solve. So x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 4 can be factored into x plus 3 squared equals 4. And then using that, we can find that x equals -1 and x equals -5. However, once again, this method has some limitations. It can only factor out expressions in the term x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And it becomes challenging if b isn't even. So lastly, we move on to the quadratic formula, which is one of my favorites. So first, you just write down the formula, which is here. And then you plug in a, b, and c. So a, b, and c, plug in wherever. And 3, you simplify. So you just find the expression, simplify it, and then you find the x's. Now the good thing is this method works with any quadratic expression. The only thing is, it's very algebra heavy. So if you're confident in your algebra skills, then that's the method for you. But also you do have to remember the quadratic formula. But there is a video in the description that will forever keep the quadratic formula playing in your head for the rest of your life, if you want that. So in general, whichever method you choose, it's up to you. I personally like the AC method or factoring, depending on if there's an a term, and the quadratic formula. I never really liked completing the square too much. But yeah, that's my video. Outro. I need to go to sleep.